Hi everybody, my name is Don Robertson and I'm here once again to do the video about the panel discussion for the Modern Stoicism Patreon page. As you can see, I'm travelling, so not in my usual studio, probably won't be for a while. You might get some videos from me from kind of slightly random locations over the next couple of months. So the quote is from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and it's an excerpt from a longer passage. It says, "Of man's life his time is a point, his substance flowing, his perceptions faint, the constitution of his whole body decaying, his soul a spinning wheel, his fortune hard to predict, and his fame doubtful." That is to say, all the things of the body are a river, the things of the soul a dream and delusion. Life is a war and a journey in a foreign land, and afterwards oblivion. So that is one of the most striking, one of my favourite passages from the Meditations, and I'll speak a little bit about what some of the panel members have said, and then I'll make some comments about it myself. So Chuck Chakrapani said that the quote's typical of the melancholic Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Like many other passages in the Meditations, read in isolation it seems depressing, but Marcus was not the one to give up. He turns what appears to be a futile endeavour into one of joyous determination and action. And then he quotes from how the passage continues. This question comes up a lot, of whether Marcus comes across as being depressed, and I mean there are basically two aspects to the response to that. One is perhaps the simplest thing to say, and the first thing I should say is that we also have some of Marcus's private correspondence, which was discovered in the 19th century. And it consists of letters between Marcus and Marcus Cornelius Fronto, his Latin rhetoric tutor, who was a family friend and a famous rhetorician or sophist. And in those letters we get a real glimpse into Marcus Aurelius's true personality, into his private life, and he comes across as first and foremost an incredibly affectionate man, very good-humoured. He complains about fairly mundane things like little health problems, and there's little relationship conflicts and things that he's dealing with. But he doesn't come across at all as depressive or bleak. He comes across as very likeable and affectionate, and very adept at dealing with conflicts in relationships with other people as well. Very shrewd man, and very caring about his family and friends. So that's the first thing to say. That's a more direct glimpse of Marcus Aurelius' personality, and he doesn't come across as gloomy at all. Oh, incidentally, we're also told in the Historia Augusta, if I remember correctly, that he was perceived as being serious but never gloomy. So not melancholic, but just kind of like a serious guy. And he was also gregarious, like he was friendly, he got on with people. And in the Meditations, these passages are formulaic. The more you read the Meditations, the more you should realise that Marcus is drawing on his extensive training and education in an entire philosophical tradition. So these aren't just his kind of personal musings. He's doing exercises that have been around for many centuries, and if he's meditating on his own mortality, it's because so did Stoics for many centuries before him, and so did philosophers like Socrates. So that's not because he's depressed, it's because it's what philosophers do. So that, I think people are often misled when they take the Meditations to be a direct reflection of Marcus's personality. It does reveal some things about his personality, but not in the superficial way that people often assume. So Chuck also says, reading Meditations is like finding yourself in a dark tunnel with a guide who keeps telling you how dark the tunnel is and there's no way out. When you're on the verge of despair, the same guide shows the way to brilliant light. It's a very dramatic way of putting it. It's interesting. Gregory Lopez says, some people may take passages like this as an example of Marcus being gloomy. I demur. He's not being gloomy at all. While we can't be sure what went through the emperor's head as he wrote this, recalling that Marcus used the Meditations as an exercise to counter moods and thoughts he was experiencing at the time allows us to take an educated guess. That is one way of trying to read his personality into the Meditations, although many of the themes in the Meditations are generic and formulaic. So for example, all Stoics would be expected to contemplate their own mortality. So, that doesn't necessarily tell us that Marcus was concerned about his own mortality at a kind of personal level. Although he was a sickly guy, so he probably was. My educated guess here is that Marcus found himself pondering fame and bodily health. It is interesting that Marcus doesn't talk a lot about craving wealth in the Meditations, whereas other philosophical authors, other Stoics do. According to Stoic philosophy, these aren't goods, fame and bodily health. Yet Marcus may have caught himself thinking that they were. Yeah, possibly. I suspect this mind state is what prompted Marcus to write the passage we're examining, in which he uses the Heraclitean physics of change and flux to remind himself of the ultimate lack of value in things like bodily health and fame. So rather than Marcus indulging in depressive thoughts, Marcus instead may have found himself obsessing over things that most of us do, health and fame. Catching himself with these impressions, he then used his personal journal to counter and correct them, yep, possibly, reminding himself that health and fame have no value, and then spurring himself to work on the one thing that does, his own character, yep. So what I wanted to say, that was what Greg Lopez had said, this is one of the passages in the Meditations that shows the most polish in terms of his style of writing. It's the best example of his rhetorical skill, perhaps, in Greek, which we have Herodes Atticus to thank for. Marcus, in this little excerpt from a longer passage, is talking about the impermanence of material things and the superficial and transient nature of a person's reputation. And he refers to this Heraclitean metaphor of the river of time, which is one of the major recurring themes. He mentions this idea at least half a dozen times in the Meditations, if I remember rightly. And he refers to Heraclitus almost as often as he refers to Epictetus, his two favourite philosophers, it seems, in the Meditations. So, and throughout the history of Stoicism, there was a connection with Heraclitus, this pre-Socratic philosopher who had the doctrine of pantorei, everything flows. You can't step into the same river twice because new waters are constantly flowing in. The idea that the universe is constantly in flux, like the Buddhist doctrine of impermanence, basically. Cleanthes, the second head of the Stoic school, wrote several volumes on Heraclitus, and it's quite possible that Zeno, the founder of the Stoic school, did as well. And certainly I think there are some other Stoics that we know wrote about Heraclitus. So the fact that Marcus refers to him so much, it could be that it's just Marcus is really into him. I think that's pretty unlikely, though. Marcus had a very extensive education with some of the best Stoic teachers in his day, and so at the very least his teachers were probably the ones that gave him this enthusiasm for Heraclitus. And it seems likely that they were drawing on references to that philosophy in the earlier Stoic literature, because we know the Stoics had long been interested in Heraclitus and probably the physics of his philosophy, the doctrine of flux. This is a very poignant passage. It's often noted. It's likely that Marcus wrote much of the Meditations, maybe all of it, in the legionary camps such as Carnuntum, along the Danube, in Austria and in the Balkans during the First Marcomannic War. So when he talks about the river of time here, he may literally have been beside the river Danube, so this huge river that marked the Roman frontier and across which the Romans fought, carried out trade, sailed a navy. So it's of immense importance to the Romans. They personified it as a river god. It's a big deal to them. It's on the Aurelian column. The river Danube is depicted several times and personified as a god on it as well. So when Marcus talks about the river of time, if you imagine he's literally in his physical environment, he's beside this river that's the central thing in his life at that point. It has this added poignancy. And life is a journey in a foreign land. He's probably in Austria when he's writing this, Pannonia, as the Romans called the province at the time. And he viewed himself very much as being in a foreign land, in a different climate and so on, and engaged that life is warfare. He was literally engaged in warfare when he wrote about this. So this passage, although it refers metaphorically to our situation in life in general, it's also a direct reflection of the physical situation that Marcus actually found him in. So it's one of the most beautiful passages in the Meditations. I would encourage you to take a closer look at it. So I hope you found that little reflection useful, and maybe if you go on the Patreon page, you want to add suggestions for other quotes that you'd like the panel to discuss next month, that would be fantastic. So thanks very much for tuning in once again, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Bye.